can hear you.
Sanjeev, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear
Like
you.
a good car game going or something.
Christine, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
All right, fantastic.
Thank you.
You could go to the gym, maybe, maybe go swimming, I don't know.
Hang out at the cigar bar.
Go have a beer, maybe. Yeah, that's a good question. It's like, what do we do before township?
I've been here for Tuesday nights for so long that I don't even
No, but
beforehand.
before you ran for office.
I was still here for
You were still
instead
you're right,
yes,
but you were.
because I was sitting in the back.
That's right,
there,
that's right,
and
that's
I
right.
spent every
Because you
Tuesday
kept fighting.
Yeah, no, you could hear everything.
Oh, what I gotta tell you, like how clear. I was
Wait a
like,
second, this
oh,
wasn't
what
on.
did we do before committee meetings?
Folks,
on
it
Thursday
appears
night?
that we
I
are
don't know,
back
clear.
online.
Wait,
We're
no,
gonna give it
thanks for
another
letting me
minute.
know.
If you were listening to the Township Committee
All
meeting
right.
and we just rebooted our whole system,
Still cannot hear you.
Hello, can people hear me?
All right, we're good?
Yes, now we can hear you. Rajesh, you can go ahead.
Yep, thank you, Sanjeev.
Sorry, Mayor, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Sir, you have your hand raised. If you would just say your name and your address, that'd be terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Rajesh Ramadas, live at 21 South Mountain Road in Melbourne.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to public comment. It is disheartening that this is the first, that the agreement was apparently passed and voted upon initially without giving us the without disclosing the agreement to us so that we could public comment. So to me, this is the first time that I'm really getting the opportunity to public comment. So that alone makes the agreement, like the cornerstone of democracy is the ability of people who are affected, of citizens to public comment. We were given a fait accompli meaning, okay, we have to do this. So we were told, we were given a result, and then we are given the opportunity to public comment after the agreement was voted upon, which isn't how things should happen in a democracy. I want fair share housing in Melbourne. I think our children are enriched by being together with children of various economic backgrounds. But that being said, the agreement as it is currently, as it has been voted upon currently, and the ordinances for implementing the agreement, which we are discussing now, it changes densities unfairly across different neighborhoods in Melbourne. I believe that a fairer agreement needs to be negotiated, and I encourage you all. So right now, when I walk on Melbourne Avenue from my home to downtown, when my child walks to middle school, I track her every minute because people drive like crazy on Melbourne Avenue. Right now, this is before B2C is approved with a density of 40 units per acre. It is obvious that, to me at least, that the people who passed the agreement don't really understand what it is like to walk on a road that states a speed limit of 25 miles per hour, but on which cars drive at 50 miles per hour at the existing density. And now we are asked to support more density in our neighborhood. This is not right. I respectfully encourage you all to rethink your vote, rethink the impact of these decisions on the people that actually live, walk, and go to school in these neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bird, you're muted. Thank you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Very good. My name is Jim Bird. I'm at 115 Nursery Road, Titusville, New Jersey, and that's in Mercer County. I was former mayor in Hopewell Township, and now I'm president of Citizens
Sir?
Improvement. Yes,
Excuse me? Are you a resident of Melbourne?
Yeah, public comment.
doesn't make any difference whether I am or not.
I just asked him a question. I didn't hear where he said.
Stop,
I couldn't
stop
hear
the
him,
clock.
Mr. Feld.
Stop the clock.
Okay, can you say that again, please, where you're from? And why is that?
Well,
Yes, I'm from-
Mayor.
Once again, start the clock over again, please. Start the clock over. Jim Bird, 115 Nursery Road, Titusville,
Mr.
New
Bird,
Jersey,
if you
Mercer
hear me,
County.
it's actually very, your voice is not clear at all.
I will call up and do this by phone.
Can we try someone else to?
So I will be back in touch.
back to him, but I couldn't.
So we're gonna come back to you. We're first gonna see if someone else's audio can come through. Eric, you're on.
Hi, my name is Eric Osserman. I don't know what happened to my picture, but my name is Eric Osserman. I live at 44 Hawthorne Road in Short Hills. First, I've got to applaud all the speakers tonight that spoke so forcefully and full of information against the proposal before the Township Committee. I urged the Township Committee to vote it down. And I'm usually a man of many words. I'm going to be a man of very few words. In a prior life, I was a practicing litigator. And I would be very eager as plaintiff's counsel for an injured party living over the dump or DPW site, if you prefer. I would cast a broad net of liability. And I would sue every member of the Township Committee who decided in favor of building units on a former dump site. And I urge each of you on the panel to think about that if you're going to go forward and vote for the proposal before you. Because you may say, well, I'm acting within the bounds of my authority. But I would say as plaintiff's counsel, you are overlooking a lot of commentary made tonight, let alone what an engineer might discover or miss in approving a site there. It will be a terrible stain on our community if anyone gets hurt there. And I urge you too, for all the reasons we heard tonight, to take a time out on this. You've uncovered through the residents a lot of new information to consider. And I think you really should put your more deliberative hats on and think twice before going forward with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Osserman. Thank you.
Mr. Bird, you're on.
Let's see if that works.
Yes, is that better?
Yes, yes, sir.
Very good. My name is Jim Bird. My address is 115 Nursery Road, Titusville, New Jersey, Mercer County. I used to be mayor in the township, and now I'm president of Citizens Improving Affordable Housing. In 1975, COA came into existence. That's the Council on Affordable Housing down in Mount Laurel. That basically was ignored by all the municipalities in New Jersey until 1985, when Mount Laurel 2 came into existence. At that time, the Builder's Remedy came into existence, which was 20% affordable housing, 80% market value. Let's take a step back about how the affordable housing equation came about. It was done by a fellow in Princeton. And what he did was he did it on a square mile basis for the municipalities. However, he did not take into consideration things like quarries, cemeteries, roadways, and things like that, and pulled out a number for each municipality. To me, that's completely incorrect, and it has to be rectified. I think that we have to look at all the municipalities in a different way by looking at them. Are they manufacturers, agricultural, quarry, or areas? Back to the 20% affordable housing, 80% market value. That's where a major problem occurs, because nope, there can be challenges, of course, with the number of affordable housing units, but the major part is 80% market value. And when you're talking 80% market value, you look pay your taxes, and you'll find out that what really hits you is when between 55 to 75% of your property taxes go to school, to your public school system. And that's where it really hits home. I think there has to be consideration by you people if you're coming to a conclusion. And I think the first thing you should do is get in touch with the people at Middletown, New Jersey, County. They have basically stepped away from affordable housing completely. And they look at it on the basis that find out who's the winner for.
All right.
Are you all able to hear Mr. Bird? Because
Almost
I
done.
don't want to interfere, but I cannot hear anything.
This is.
Hold on. Mr. Bird, we could not hear a word you were saying, sir. And I think, the only thing I could do is say that you're for citizens improving affordable housing, and it must be a website or something we should probably all go look at. Right? That was him, that wasn't us, right? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hello, this is Matt Gentile.
I'm Mr. Gentile.
Hi, I live on 29 Old Short Road in Lakewood. I've been there for about 25 years. Listen, I grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood. I didn't know it was lower middle class till I discovered towns like Millburn. As examples, my brother and I lived in an unfinished attic with no heat and air conditioning as our family grew, and there was no room for us in the main part of the house. If we wanted Christmas presents, we had to work and pitch in half for whatever we wanted. And we never went on a family vacation until I was 21. And my parents realized I'd be moving out of the house soon. And the family never had a vacation together. So the five of us finally went to Cape Cod when I was 21. So why do I say this? You know, my cousins, who maybe had a little more money than us, they would go on vacation once a year, and they'd send us a postcard and a box of saltwater taffy. And I remember how jealous I felt, not resentful, but jealous, maybe a little bit bad. And I ultimately worked my way up and made my way into a town like Millburn and love it here. But I wonder what kind of what are we really doing for the kids and the lower income people that might move here? Are we really doing them a favor? We're in a town where people, go on exotic vacations on a regular basis. They have the latest iPhones. They might even get cars for graduation. I mean, I wonder how the others are going to fit in, the low income people are going to fit in, and how they're going to feel. I know that I wouldn't have felt good living in a town like Millburn when I was growing up with the means that we had. But I made my way in with hard work. And I think we have to consider that. I don't know if this is, part of the legal and analysis that you do, but I just think on a cultural level and a personal level, people need to kind of make their way through life and up the economic ladder, and to airdrop them in to an environment, an economic environment that they haven't earned their way into, that they may not be comfortable with. I'm not sure that we're doing them or ourselves any favor. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gentile.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, Marilee Reesbeck, 91 Whittingham Terrace. I've lived in town for most of the last 64 years. I'd like to comment on the ordinance for the revised overlay zones and on the project at 9 Main Street. I've been following the progress of fair share housing in Milburn for a number of years now, and I understand that our community has an obligation to provide affordable housing. Unfortunately, our township has lagged far behind other communities in New Jersey, along with a few other affluent communities such as Englewood Cliffs, Saddle River, Princeton, etc. Milburn is one of the last towns in New Jersey to approve affordable housing development, with the very first units offered at the Upton complex just 2 to 3 years ago. Due to the town's inaction, the Fair Share Housing Center views our community as resistant to compliance with Mount Laurel doctrine. And this has forced our township committee into a defensive position, which resulted in the need for significant compromise when approving the plans for the Woodland Road project and subsequent development projects. This settlement was unanimously approved last year by the township committee, and it will allow immunity to builders' risk lawsuits to remain in place and also significantly reduce the number of housing units that Milburn will be required to provide. 2 members of the current township committee changed their minds about their votes and have tried to reverse the decision. And one of these individuals is using this position as a campaign platform. 9 Main Street, the 100% affordable housing 75-unit development is certainly not a perfect solution. Ideally, affordable housing would be blended with non-subsidized housing, as the Upton and Woodland development initiatives are providing. However, this approach allows Milburn to accelerate the fulfillment of our obligation, and it reduces our overall future obligation. Residents who have only recently become aware of Milburn's affordable housing situation have been whipped into a frenzy, fueled by a petition and misinformation campaign launched by a small group of residents and the 2 township committee members who changed their minds after approving the 2021 agreement. The anonymous petition and the flyers left all over town on cars have no names attached. They're just labeled concerned citizens. If these residents are so concerned, why not put your name on it? There have been assertions that the town can overturn the settlement, that we can fight the Fair Share Housing Center. However, if these residents were to research this more thoroughly and understand the precarious position that Milburn currently finds itself, they would realize that we have much more to lose if we attempt to defy the Fair Share Housing Center. The claims of toxicity on the 9 Main Street site have been overblown. Test results show minimal contamination that can be mitigated. Given Milburn's industrial past with hat factories, paper mills, it's no surprise that there is some residual in the samplings. The hysteria about the contamination and the dire warnings that Milburn would be sued for creating another Love Canal is just another excuse to back out of the settlement. The Fair Share Housing Center will not approve the site if it's contaminated. The Fair Share Housing Center has filed a brief with the court requesting that Milburn lose our immunity and also lose our local oversight of planning and zoning board decisions. Should that become a reality, it would have a profound impact on our community. We must not let this happen. The overlay zones are certainly not ideal. However, they need to be approved as part of the settlement. The new Republican candidate for township committee is attempting to scare residents by claiming that Milburn will develop every possible element of the revised township overlay zones and create more than 4,000 housing units to increase population by 70%. This is a ludicrous claim. Milburn has oversight for now over what can be built in compliance with township code, as long as the township complies with this agreement. If the agreement is voided, the court will likely order the transfer of this responsibility to the county or state. We must approve these ordinances and allow the settlement to stand. Let's stop blaming the current township committee for the legacy left by years of inaction on affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Riesbeck.
Good evening. Sarah Sherman, 42 Greenwood Drive. Just want to remind everyone that we are more than a one-issue town. I'm very pleased to see that the drainage project in the eastern part of South Mountain is going out for bid and is listed on tonight's consent agenda. Lest we forget, we are 10 months out from the devastating effects of the remnants of Tropical Storm Ida, and some people are still recovering. The Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee has been working to find solutions to the flooding challenges we face in the township. We began as a group expected to meet quarterly, but it soon became obvious that this is a very dedicated group willing to meet weekly as well as on weekends to understand how the neighborhoods in the township are affected by flooding and how Millburn might address this pressing issue. So we are pleased that the drainage and home elevation projects are moving forward, but we have much more to do. So let's not lose sight of this issue amid the noise, disagreement, and discussion on affordable housing. I would like to comment on one other thing. When people say that they don't know what's going on, we no longer have a weekly newspaper, which can provide us with impartial news and with well thought out editorials. So it's incumbent on all of us to be well-informed citizens. And that means you have to seek out information. I am always suggesting to residents that they go to the township website to find out anything that they need to find out about ordinances, documents, the latest news, when is the schedule of meetings. And it may mean that you have to start attending meetings and not wait to hear from your neighbor that something is going on that you've never heard of before. So I recommend to everybody, it's a little bit of work, and it maybe you have a very busy schedule and not much time, but we all need to be informed citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman.
Hi, this is Fran Feld.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Fran, would you just give us your address, please?
Oh, sure. As of next month, I will have been at 948 Ridgewood Road in Millburn for 39 years.
Thank you.
I'm having my 39th anniversary, and I'm hoping to celebrate because I've had 39 wonderful years raising my children, living in this town as a retiree now for the last couple of years. So for every stage, new mom, regular mom, working lady, commuting to the city, and now a retiree, doing volunteer work, etc. I've been very happy in this town, and I, feel that what everyone is doing here is really important. I believe that this fair share housing project, as it is currently designed, is a mistake, particularly because of the density increases. Now, with all due respect to what Marilee Riesbeck just said, she feels that there won't be an overabundance of housing here, that it's being exaggerated. And she's, welcome to that opinion. She also pointed a finger at two people, which would be Tara and Diane, who originally did vote along with the other three members of the TC. And then, believe it or not, people wake up one day and realize, uh-oh, I made a mistake. Has anyone listening to me ever woken up and said, I think I made a mistake? Are we allowed to make mistakes? I think so. Are we allowed to publicly tell people we made mistakes? That takes a lot of bravery, I would say, that I commend Diane and Tara for publicly getting up and saying they made a mistake and they don't want to go along with the original plan that they signed on to. And with that said, I would like to say that addressing this to Maggie, which of course we're all supposed to be addressing our statements to Maggie, but Maggie, I've known you for many years. Richard, the same. Sanjeev is new to me, but I voted for all of you. And I have been very disappointed in how you're handling this situation. With all the information you've been given, people are putting a lot of time into research. Some of the research is general research, like my years as a social worker in New York, where we learned that putting more than two people, a whole group of people in a housing project is a mistake. if they're low-income people. Those buildings have been destroyed. Whoever it was that said that they're building townhouses, yes, in Newark, yes, and all over Jersey City are townhouses, no more projects. They're not good for people, towns, or anyone else. So that refers to the DPW building. Okay, so I'm done. I've said my piece. I'm asking you, Maggie, Richard, knowing me, knowing how earnest I am here, my background, and my caring about this town, and Sanjeev, I'm asking you to please consider reversing this decision, getting a new attorney, getting a new planner, and going back out there. The Fair Share Housing is not the Wizard of Oz, or maybe they are. They're not the Wizard of Oz you think they are. They're just the little man behind the curtain. And we have the power. We're Milton.
Thank you, Ms. Feld. Have a lovely evening.
And you too.
Good night, Joan. Mr. Peterson? Sir? Maybe come back to him. Okay. Hello? Good evening. Try Miss Urso, she gets this.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Before, if you could just answer one question, will we have the opportunity to speak on the ordinances?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so then goes to my first public comment. So I emailed my concerns regarding the equipment earlier today. I thank Ms. Prupus for responding with our BA. For the record.
Miss Urso, just for the record, I apologize. Your name and address, please.
Oh, yes, Perry Urso, 514 Milburn Avenue in Short Hills. I hope you give me back some time. So I emailed earlier my concerns regarding the equipment. I must have had a premonition, but I would like to thank Ms. Prupus for responding with our BA. For the record, clearly there is a problem. I do appreciate the efforts, but it's time to hire the right professionals. I echo most of the members in the audience and applaud them. Clearly, it's not the same five who've been repeatedly criticized. I certainly hope Christine Best's concerns are recognized and addressed and not given the same courtesy as the select five. I'd like to mention tonight about the township's insurance. As a property owner and landlord, we were told by the BA at the DPW contamination information meeting last week that the township has a $25,000 deductible and a $2 million liability. Is that right? I know you're going to answer later. However, I just wanted to say, I think the township is greatly underinsured. As a landlord, our tenants are required to hold a $2 million liability, and which recently has been increased to a $3 million with a liability for an umbrella. And that's just as for a tenant for a space. So I think you need to check into your insurance. Excuse my little friends. As Mr. I was informed that the BPM, Bear Property Management litigation, was dismissed without prejudice. Even though the courts have found the discovery and the dispute to be moot and had ordered non-binding arbitration of statutory interpretation dispute, and which was also postponed by the mediator. We inquire how this order was entered without notice and the opportunity to be heard, especially after the matter was assigned from Judge Moore to Judge Gardner for adjudication. No one answers our questions, such as producing. My fur babies have something to say also. My apologies. I found it interesting that I'm sorry, going back. No one answers our questions, such as producing statutory legislation evidence supporting the downtown pedestrian mall closing. I found it interesting that Mr. Wasserman stated at our last 3 to 4 hour meeting on June 21st, held in the dark with audio only, that certain property owner and business owners located within the pedestrian mall should bear a higher portion of expense. In addition, I know Mr. Feld had mentioned about the budget reports upon the retention of our new CFO. In response to several members of the audience mentioning public information, in June, I requested from our CFO the franchise fees received from FiOS and Comcast or Verizon. So in 2021, the amount was $264,367.13. Was that the amount received? What was the amount received in 2022? And Alex, are these fees still applied to our general fund? If so, basically it's like free money for the township to use as they wish to, right? Why is this body continuing to deny the community from communications and kept in the public in the dark by way of the local cable channel? HTTV offered to continue their services to Milburn and air local broadcasting in the sum of $20,000 a year, a small percentage of what's collected. So why is that we are the only town who does not utilize their local public cable channel and refuses to inform our residents any way possible and continue not to air our township meetings? Also to date, what is the amount hired by Beth McManus has been paid? Is it more than $68,000? And the Banish Associates more than $67,000?
Ms. Urso, if you would just wrap it up, that'd be grand.
Yep, I just have one more comment.
Thank you.
May of 2022, I asked the question, I got involved. I've been relentlessly retaliated against by this body. August of 2020, I was rescued and reacquainted with Mr. Feld. Since I've learned so much, especially drew my attention to the bill list. And lastly, regarding the consent agenda items 22-170 and the bill list. There's checks made payable to QBE, specialty insurance amount of $43,000. Interesting, why are Jeff Feld versus Milburn, there's 8 dates listed with January 7th to May 25th. But coincidentally, there are 18 listed for Milburn Courtyards versus Milburn, and there are no dates referencing these charges. So my question is, why are we paying an insurance carrier for costs and expenses defending known to be Carrie Heller, the Beehive, aka Wells Fargo Fair Share Housing relation litigation? If you can also answer, isn't it correct that this matter has been settled in 2021 without public hearing or notice? Is that right? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Urso. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This is Regina Truitt, 385 Hartshorn Drive. Thank you for your service to the Township committee members. Briefly, I wanted to say that I wholeheartedly agree with Mary Riesebeck and former Mayor Jackie Lieberberg and their comments tonight regarding the fair share housing settlement and ordinances. While the fair share housing laws are definitely not perfect and could use improvement, they are constitutional law, New Jersey constitutional law, and we need to abide by this law. Almost a year ago, there was a unanimously approved negotiated settlement that was approved by every member of the Township Committee. This has been court approved and now there has been a motion filed by the Fair Share Housing Center, a scathing motion filed on July 7th. I don't think they're kidding. I think they are salivating over Milburn Township and would love to bring the hammer down on our heads should we refuse to honor the terms of that court approved settlement. I urge the Township Committee members tonight to approve these ordinances so that we can meet our obligation for fair share housing under New Jersey constitutional law and also to abide by the terms of our settlement that we agreed to. Thanks again for all your service.
Thank you, Mrs. Truitt. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is Adam Brender. I reside at 18 Whittingham Terrace. I grew up in town and moved back to town recently. And I am extremely concerned by the actions that this current township committee is taking in trying to move forward and bend over for fair share housing to take over our town. This is not about meeting a constitutional obligation. This is about being scared and not sticking up for what's right for the residents who have clearly stated their concerns, and for the many, many residents who aren't even aware of what you're about to force upon them. My family is involved in property development. I can tell you that in order for us to try to get approval to build a layer on a parking garage that was additional parking, the amount of scrutiny that went into it by the township that we worked in, which is in East Orange, was so dramatic and so intensive. We had to do rainwater collection studies. We had to do traffic studies and impact studies. We had to have countless evaluations done by numerous professionals. And the fact that we are now being told that thousands of units are going to be developed throughout our town, and there hasn't been a single study evaluating traffic, police impact, impact on the schools. And let's be realistic, that's the number one reason that people are moving to town and interested in this town, is because of the schools and what they offer in terms of an opportunity for children. I don't think anyone here is opposed to providing fair and equal housing. That is a right, and that should be provided. But what we're talking about is making such a large impact by putting thousands of units throughout our town. That's going to bring thousands and thousands of additional people when there have been no impact studies. It's irresponsible, it's wrong, and it's not right to do both to the people who have been living here for their lives and to the people that are going to move here or interested in moving here, because there's been no considerations made on their behalf. It's very easy for people who live on Hartshorn Drive or Parsonage Hill or up in Short Hills on the dead-end street at the top of the hill, where they don't get the impact of the people that are walking down their street every single day in the crowded traffic and the noise and the countless other factors that come into play when you add thousands and thousands of people in a congested area. The density population and density ordinances that you're trying to push through are out of whack. They're not realistic. There are other alternatives here. And because you are seemingly having your hand forced is what it makes like you're trying to say is that your hand is being forced. But the reality of the situation is you have a voice and you have an opportunity to stand up for the thousands and thousands of people in town that have voiced their concerns that you're supposed to be representing. So I urge you tonight to reconsider and please take more time to evaluate other opportunities and other avenues to provide fair and equal housing as we are required to do. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brender.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. This is Richard Footer, 333 Melbourne Avenue.
Good evening, Mr. Futter.
Hi, how are you? Okay, so I'm listening to all this and I'm hearing the different approaches. I'm dealing more with the here and now. The original Mount Laurel premise was based on the philosophy that if you're good enough to work in a community, you should be good enough to live there. I don't think it was ever meant to be that communities such as Melbourne and others would change the whole climate and give up their history the way fair share housing is pushing everybody into it. I'm a little concerned that, well, when COA was running the fair share housing or the affordable housing, they looked at the region and they had much more balance. What I'm looking at here is you're dealing with fair share housing who's looking at it town by town. Now you take Milburn and you're bordered by a small town, Maplewood, and you've got Livingston, and you've got Springfield, you've got Madison, Chatham, you've got Union. It's a region. How many affordable housing units does this region actually need to supply for what they think is going to be attractive? Has anybody done a deep dive into whom we're dealing with? Has anybody looked at the people who are involved with fair share housing, which I believe are volunteers? Is there an ideological imbalance to the way they only look at how many units can they get out of a community rather than what is actually needed and how will it leave the community? New Jersey has always had a habit of overreacting. They did it with strip malls, they did it with shopping malls, they did it with big box stores until there was just not enough of a piece of a pie for anyone to really eat and survive. So when you put all of that together and there's a glut of housing, and this is bringing me to a question that I've asked several times in the smaller breakout groups, the informational sessions. There's a 30-year commitment on these housing, on the affordable housing. When there is a glut and when people may avoid a location that's 100% affordable when they can pick somewhere else because there could be an overabundance, what happens if you're sitting with inventory and you can't get rid of it? Who does that go on to? Who benefits by it? Who suffers by it? Is it the developer? Is it the town? Is it the state going to put subsidies in there? I have no clue, but I've never had an answer. I got close to one at the last informational session where I asked the planner, and his answer was, oh, well, there are some places that already have waiting lists. But you're now dealing with a large amount of units in smaller communities that are contiguous. And I think there should be a pause and take a look how many units are set up in that small cluster to be developed or required. And then take a look, what is business actually attracting for employees to live there? Now, I know that's not the only market for this, but I think it's a dangerous situation to not know what the end game is, especially if you're looking at a 75 unit, not mixed location, which could be avoided if right down the road there's another choice, especially if there's the glut. What happens? Who gets stuck holding the bag?
Mr. Futter?
Yes.
If you could just wrap it up, sir, just because you've gone over your time. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I would just like to make one brief thing. The two-way street, you're going to award a contract and whatever. What would be the possibility of doing the mock-up for a few months? I recommended that before Complete Streets. I'm recommending it or suggesting you to consider that maybe a mock-up temporary without getting into a heavy expense and a situation where it might cause a rip out. Just to consider that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Futter.
Thank you.
Have a lovely evening.
You too.
One more, Jess? Yep. Hello,
Hello,
good evening.
hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, Maureen Marquetta, 214 Passaic Avenue, Short Hills. I'd like to echo Mr. Brender's words and Mr. Gentile's words as well. The impact on the schools must be considered. We have 2 children going into 2nd grade next year. All of the schools are overcrowded. This is going to change the quality of the education that people move to Millburn, Short Hills for. I've lived here for 25 years. We have 3 other children who went through Millburn schools. They're 27, 23, and 21. The difference that I have seen with my 2 little ones is not good. The teachers, the staff have way more children to deal with, and it shows. I'd also like to say that the Main Street closing during the week is a nightmare. I bring our kids to camps in Millburn, and the traffic is horrific. The DPW site proposal of the low income housing is going to make it much worse. This isn't going to invite people into our town. It makes people want to go to another town to buy things, and it's turning me away, and I've lived here all these years. Just reconsider and look into other avenues for that property. I am not an expert, but this is what's going on already is a nightmare. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mrs. Marquetta.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay. I'll now close public comment period. At this time, our professionals and committee members may directly ask any questions made by the public. Please only directly answer questions that you wish to speak on, and do not request that other members. It's not a time for dialogue or debate. Members of the public may contact the township or their TC at any time outside of our business meetings. I want to start with our business administrator, Mr. McDonald. Are there any questions that you've heard this evening from the people that have spoken that you can answer for us, please? Sure.
I can only comment on a few. One is just that the question came up about QBE, who is the township's insurance carrier.
Yep.
And we have a deductible RA on that coverage, in which we are paying them as a result of the Feld versus Millburn suit, as well as the Millburn Courtyard suit. The reason for the description on the bills list is likely as a result of the number of characters that are able to be populated in that. We'd certainly provide some dates, unless Mr. Feld had already opened those particular documents. But okay, well, we'll get you the dates. Sure.
Good. Thank you.
And then the amount received for the 2022 cable franchise, certainly we can get that to Ms. Urso, but that is realized in a budget every year and has been. So it is a revenue against our expenses. It's not necessarily earmarked for anything in particular. Those are the two questions I think that were raised that I can answer, and we'll certainly make sure that Ms. Urso gets the 2022 revenue figure for cable franchise.
Year to date.
Well, yeah, usually it's received in two installments.
Oh, it is. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Brewer, do you have anything that you want to add?
No specific responses to anything.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go, Mr. Vinayak, I'm going to go to you since you're up there in the netherworld.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I have affordable housing specifically I'd like to shed some lights on.
Sure.
So first of all, let me thank all our residents who are in attendance tonight. And I see there are a lot of attendance, and thank you for coming on. Thank you for your interest in the state issue of state mandated affordable housing. I know whatever I talk here may get twisted or perceived differently, but I'll try to just be factual and try to say whatever is as is. First of all, please know that we all share in the same frustration, concerns, and anger about the state mandate. We live here, our homes are here, our lives are in Melbourne. We are taxpayers, we are neighbors. Our kids go to school. I have one middle schooler and I have one high schooler in the town. And just like many of you are here tonight. And like you, we do not like or appreciate the fact that Melbourne, like all other municipalities in the state of New Jersey, are on the receiving end of the state mandate. This is a complex issue with a complex history, but in our state and right here in Melbourne, the issue is not new for Melbourne. In fact, Township has been contending this state mandate affordable housing for 40 years. The settlement agreement entered into last year by the Township allowed Melbourne to meet its past and current affordable housing obligation, spanning all the way back to 1987 and through a current obligation period, which runs to 2025. For those who are relatively new to this issue, or for those who still have questions, it may be helpful to share the following. Affordable housing is mandated again by the state, enforced by the courts, and effectively required by the state constitution. All municipalities in New Jersey must provide a realistic opportunity to build affordable housing. There is no opting out for any municipality. There is seriously no opting out. And when it comes to the pressures and the hardship that this mandates renders on municipalities, we are not alone. Municipalities all around the state and right here in Essex County are dealing with the similar challenges. Towns like Madison, Chatham, Livingston, and more. State mandated affordable housing is court sanctioned and court enforced, and new rounds of obligations are continual. So most people do not understand that the process behind affordable housing, methodology and calculations, orders, timelines is actually driven by the courts. The state, the courts, the court-appointed advocate fair share housing, court-appointed special masters, those are planners and developers, all play a role. All municipalities are required to meet court-sanctioned obligations, and new rounds of state mandate affordable housing obligations take place every 10 years. So why did we settle? First of all 5 members of this governing body agreed to enter into the settlement agreement on behalf of the township last year. And why did we settle? Because we came to learn no municipality in New Jersey has ever prevailed in the courts in attempt to prevent affordable housing obligation moving forward. And why did we settle? Because those municipalities that have fought and lost in court, and there was some example given like Englewood Cliff, suffered significant consequences. And why did we settle after 38 years of inaction? All 5 members of this governing body will recall that when the court handed Melbourne an aggressive court-enforced deadline, which essentially gave us 30 days to settle or risk losing control of all land matters in the township, the decision to enter into settlement agreement was passed by a unanimous vote by all these 5 members, including me. This township committee at the time decided that a priority was to ensure we maintain control over managing density in Melbourne. And despite current actions and opinions being expressed, all 5 members of this township committee understand this reality. Even though we don't like it, there is no going back on the settlement agreement. Now that Fair Share Housing has filed a motion to enforce the settlement agreement, we find ourselves at a somewhat familiar place. As was the case before we entered into the settlement agreement last year, we today find ourselves facing 2 hard choices. Then and now, the choices are the same. Last year, one choice was to litigate and risk losing control. Today, we have to decide the same thing, not to comply with the settlement agreement. We run that same risk. And I would actually really appreciate if all of you understand this is a state mandate and we are on the receiving end here. If you're so passionate, the other choice we had last year, or this is the 3rd round we settle on. By the way, the 4th round will be presented to Melbourne Township in 2025. So from 2025 to 2035, there's another round coming. And whatever solution we are coming up with, I would rather be proactive and start looking for that tenure or the 4th round. For those who are interested in changing the approach to the state's mandate on affordable housing, the change must occur in Trenton and in our courts. Contact the governor and your state representatives. Let your voices be heard there. We will gladly be a part of.
Excuse me.
Just give me one more second.
Excuse me. Sorry, Sanjeev, continue.
Let your voices be heard there. We will gladly be a part of chorus, because what is imposed on municipality like Melbourne Township is anything but fair when it comes to the aspirations that have been set around affordable housing. And again, for those who are attending the meeting new or new in town, our representation is Assemblywoman Myla Jacey, Assemblyman John McKeon, State Senator Governor Cody, and you know who represent the state, which is Governor Murphy. So I would advocate to go back to them and please raise your voice for 2025 to 2035 so we are not in the same soup for next 10 years. And couple more things on the DPW side. Fair Share Housing has come back and told us that if DPW site comes in contaminated or is not be there to build, they will take Melbourne train station open parking spot. That is their second venue to make that build out. We tried Annie Says building to be senior only. There was one comment made, we don't have senior housing. We wanted to make Annie Says just for seniors. Builders approved it or accepted it. Fair Share Housing denied it, and they pushed us again to make the regular housing for that 150 housing on Annie Says. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Vinayak. Mr. Wasserman?
Nothing right now.
Okay, Ms. Rupes?
I'm still thinking and collecting my thoughts, so.
Ms. Dahl-Eichel?
Thank you. I would try, we could have a way to make this meeting go a lot faster. When these ordinances and resolutions were first introduced for first read introduction, I put forth a motion to put a pause on these and to go back to fair share housing and amend and reconsider the disparities, everything. So I'm going to put that motion forth again this evening. I would like the committee to consider delaying, going back to fair share housing and saying we want to go to, where is this? Well, wherever that paragraph number is. Oh, page 18, paragraph 30, agreement can be amended, modified, or altered. I suggest the Township Committee does that. I strongly consider that. So my motion is on the table, Mayor.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Give me 1 second, please. Apologies.
Christine, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Great, thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Ms. Thaw Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
No,
Mr. Wasserman,
No.
Mayor Miggins.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, then I'll go on with the rest of my comments. I have been talking about, I believe Mr. Khan used my words, facts over fear. I'd emailed that to somebody. I don't know if you got that email. Facts are, we have a very poor settlement. As Mr. Carlin said, in negotiations, there's usually, both parties should walk away a little unhappy. Milburn has walked away incredibly unhappy, but Fair Share Housing is ecstatic. They got us. They picked the overlays. They picked the densities. They looked at our maps and they picked the sites. Fair Share Housing has, and I guess they're watching, they have done everything. And I've said this at many meetings. We did not have a planner in the room. Tara and I were not in the room. Ms. Miggins and Mr. Wasserman were in the room. They know how these densities came about by Ms. McManus. I'm not gonna say everything has been said. We're all geniuses. We've all gotten an education on overlays and zonings. We're all disgusted with this. I just wanna go back to several years ago, 2019, when the Silverman project was approved in the Glenwood section. There was 3 people who voted for that then. It was former Mayor Benjamin, I was the mayor then, and Mr. Levy, who's no longer on the committee. We had over 100 people in the room then. There was no Zoom, and the people were really not happy. We went through the builder's remedy lawsuit. Back then, on September 17th, on the minutes, Maggie Miggins of 34 South Terrace came forward and stated she works on Chatham Road, resides in the area, and has concerns for safety due to traffic issue. She also expressed concerns for the impact on home pricing in the area. She said the density of the project is far too high and will change the character of town. She asked they do not vote on this because there are too many questions that need to be answered. Mr. Wasserman, who was my running mate at the time, also got up, 24 Inverness Court, stated he has concerns about the size of the project and noted the town is in a tight spot. He suggested taking a pause and getting outside counsel. He expressed environmental concerns in that area and stated he is surprised that the Arboretum has not spoken out against the project. After Ms. Miggins spoke, there was an article in the paper that said ballot box Eglo. This came from my running mate at the time and a woman who now sits up here. I don't know what your plans were back then, Ms. Miggins. What I'm saying is everything I'm asking for, these 2 current township committee members asked for. The cornerstone of my campaign is not to stop Fair Share Housing. The cornerstone is independence from party politics. There are my 2 Republican running mates. There is my independent running mate, Mr. Morrow. I've not heard from the Democrat Party people. Doesn't matter. Let me go, Maggie. Everyone knows the only people, there's 3 people spoke for this. There's Trails, I'm sorry, that's not a nice word. There are members of the Democratic Party that who has spoken for this. We need to be free of the party politics that has been controlling this town for good or bad. And there are so many other things that are going on in this town. This unfortunately is sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I stopped Complete Streets. I got those parking spots put back. I will work to stop this. I will fight for this because this is not what is in the best interest of the town. And all of you have said all wonderful things. So as you see, they've had another chance to pause this. Who wanted to pause Silverman? And that was one project in town. This is the entire town. So if people from Glenwood, I know you weren't happy with that. That rests on my shoulders. Jackie and I had to vote for that. Ms. Miggins and Mr. Wasserman, you are putting the entire future of this town on your shoulders. And Mr. Vinayak, I'm a long-term resident here, so is Richard, so is Maggie. I don't know what your plans are. This is not a way to govern, period.
Thank you. Ms. Prupus, do you have anything that you wish to add?
I do.
Please.
So, oh, my mic is
Your
now
mic.
on. All right, so now it's like 10 o'clock and we've been here. What time did our meeting start? 7?
6.
6, right. We were in closed session at 6 o'clock. And I so appreciate everybody coming out to to comment, and I feel really bad because it was, no matter what you all were gonna say tonight, nobody, they weren't changing their mind. So I think that the only thing that can make a difference is, and Oyen said it, and she's right, is November. So please keep that in mind as we keep moving this forward. And to Fran, who acknowledge, I mean, some people want to sit here and they repetitively say, all 5 of you voted, all 5 of you voted, as if somehow that's like blanketing. It's like a blanket for you, like all 5. Like, I am not okay with this. And I made a huge mistake. And I'm sorry to this entire community. And I failed you. And I really had no business taking that vote or making those decisions. I was recused up until that day when it was that we all had to vote. I think that I had no experience and no right to be making these decisions. And after listening to all of the residents come out, I only wish that I could go back and really fight for you in that sense. It wouldn't have made a difference back then, and it's not going to make a difference right now, but it will make a difference come November and come the first of the year. So you need to know that if you vote for the Democratic Party, you're just going to get the same of this. And I am a Democrat. I'm a registered Democrat. I got here because I'm a Democrat and for that party. But you need to really be very clear about what's going on. So there are a few things that I want to just clarify that I learned tonight. And people want to know about the densities, and we've talked a lot about why Millburn has more densities. And Mr. Wasserman had told me and said that that was something that Fair Share wanted. And I think that you've said it before, that Fair Share Housing wanted it in a walkable place. So that's why it's not going to be up at the Hilton. And that the densities aren't going to be equally, at least that this is what Fair Share is saying, that they want, when they came in very specifically, they wanted the housing units to be in a walkable place to a train station, correct? I mean,
That was my understanding.
that was your understanding, right? So that has been, so I just want to get that piece of information out to the question about the densities, because I don't know that that's been clarified for people. That it does, but I'm just saying it's not going to be at the Hilton. They weren't going to they weren't going to accept that as, let's put it higher density at the Hilton and lower density in the town. The motion of Fair Share will be heard at the compliance hearing. It will be together. So I just want to give that piece of information out to the community. We went into closed session and talked about that motion. And I also learned something that I think is really important about the confidentiality and why we were advised by our attorney, Mr. Buzak.
Yeah, I don't know if you can.
I'm comfortable talking about it.
You're comfortable talking about what we talked about in.
Oh, totally,
closed
because I
session?
think this is not really confidential. So I'm fine about it. And I think it's totally fine. So that we couldn't share the contents of the settlement because there were interested parties of the settlement who had not signed yet. So I believe we were waiting on Woodmont. I mean, this is all public knowledge. I'm not sharing anything I can't be sharing. But Woodmont, right? Was it Woodmont? Woodmont? No one's going to clarify. I believe it was Woodmont.
Well, there were a number of developers.
Well, then Woodmont and Annie said we're waiting on us to sign it. So that's the thing. So I guess my point is, this is what I'm being told. I don't even know if this is correct or not correct. But what I do know is that I do not think that we are being represented by Mr. Buzak. I think there's a complete conflict. Wait, you guys, excuse me, please. I know that I am agreeing with all of you, and I know that you all support this, and you've all said this many times, and I'm agreeing with you. So just give me a second. So I do not think that he is the attorney who is representing our interests at this point, and I really think it's time to get a new attorney, and I'd like to put that motion forward that we fire Mr. Buzak.
I'll second that motion.
And as we obtain another council, we need a second opinion here. And Ed is way too, he's our planning board attorney and he's pressuring the planning board and they have to vote for it. Like there's something not right here and we need a new fresh set of eyes and a new attorney. So I think it's a roll call vote.
I second that motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thal-Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
As I said before, it's being very reactive. We can do this for 2025 to 2035, and then I'll.
I think it's
say
just a yes or no.
Just for that,
Excuse me,
I will say
excuse
no.
me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vinayak, can you repeat that?
No.
Mr. Wasserman,
No,
Mayor Miggins,
No.
All right, you guys have to vote separately, like vote differently in November. That's all I'm gonna say.
We are now going to move on to consent agenda resolutions. The Township Committee will now consider consent agenda resolutions. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to any items listed on the consent agenda?
yes, Mayor, I just want to say, I know that we're really talking about affordable housing quite a bit, but as a couple of people said before, maybe Sarah Sherman, you know, there are other things going on in the town. And one of the other things that's really important is that the work that we're doing in South Mountain for the drainage, and it really is a big deal. It's been talked about for many, many, many years. And finally, the Flood Mitigation Committee, along with our engineers, are actually making a lot of headway. And I'm just thrilled it's finally, we have all the releases, and I'm thrilled that it's finally going to happen.
Perfect, thank you. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 22-170 through Resolution 22-179, which are listed on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion?
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thal-Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes,
Mayor Miggins,
Yes.
thank you.
Resolution 22-180 is to award professional service agreement engineering services for two-way circulation on Essex Street with Colliers Engineering. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to Resolution 22-180?
I just want to address what Mr. Footer said. We're not,
Sure.
we're not going ahead with doing anything. This is just studying. So we're not even at the place. What's wrong?
No, I was just gonna expound upon it. Yeah.
Okay, so we're not even at the place yet where we could even go out and mark it up and test it. We're just, you want to,
Correct, right. It's a conceptual, they have to do some survey work, conceptual work. They're also going to do some public outreach, and then the last one is looking at the design. So that you're absolutely correct, Ms. Prupus. That is, we are not
and I
at that
think
point yet. But
he's right though, at before we go and move anything or spend, not that it would be it's not going to be a lot of money, I don't think, but if we ever do move forward, we should test it out first with some cones or something.
So this is where I think as a committee, as a subcommittee, we've worked on this and are focusing mainly first on one avenue or one street, Essex, and not on Milburn. So that way, there is not that many streets to break or traffic lights to put on. So I think that's what the study is, to look at in phases.
Thank you.
I think we should just let people know that this contract is not to exceed $89,500. This is a $90,000 contract. Correct, Alex?
it is actually 120,500. Because if you take the option without new counts, it is 89,500.
But with new counts, it's 120.
May I have a motion to approve Resolution 22-180?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thal-Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
yes,
Mayor Miggins,
Yes.
thank you.
So now we have ordinance in the second reading and consideration of adoption, Resolution 22-181. setting forth reasons for the Township Committee's adoption of Ordinance 2604-22 is required under NJSA 40:55D-62A. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to Resolution 22-181?
Yes, this is written for this specific purpose because this was deemed inconsistent with the master plan by unanimous vote at the last planning board meeting. So the planning board found it inconsistent with the tenets and goals and objectives of the master plan. And now the township committee, if they choose to go ahead, has to have this reasoning why they're willing to do that. Is that what explains that?
Do you want to explain that, Andy?
Actually, we have Graham Petto, the township.
Waiting
planner.
patiently?
Yeah, he was waiting patiently.
So am I, but that's okay.
Yeah. And also the attorney can offer his opinion too.
Mr. Petto?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Apologies, I'm not there with you all. So the resolution here before you is to, given that the planning board did find the proposed ordinance before you this evening to be not consistent or inconsistent with the master plan, the resolution before you presents justifications as to why the governing body may elect to support adoption of the ordinance, given other parameters that are outlined within the resolution, including the settlement agreement and also its objective 1.05 of the master plan, which recommends creating a realistic development opportunity for providing the township's fair share of the region's affordable housing.
So the thing that doesn't match the master plan is the number of units?
That's correct. The current housing element that was adopted in 2018 does not include recommended density consistent with that housing element. The density recommendation pursuant to the settlement agreement differs from the current adopted element of master plan.
Okay.
And not just the densities, isn't also the setbacks, the heights?
The setbacks and heights will be done when the building comes in front of the planning board. If we have the planning board working on those buildings.
And the 2018 housing element of the master plan did not contemplate setback requirements or bulk standards. It only contemplated proposed densities.
But isn't it when the building really comes in front of the planning board, that's when they actually look at the plan?
The site plan approval component will include consideration of the requirements for bulk requirements, correct?
Right, okay.
How about the heights, Graham? Wasn't heights in the master plan?
The 2018 housing element does not include height limitations with respect to this proposal.
Okay, how many pages is the master plan? Do you know offhand?
About 170 pages.
Okay, so the master plan, goal 1 seeks to encourage appropriate land uses that promote the character of the township as a small suburb of the highest quality. Objective 1.05 in this goal seeks to create the realistic opportunity to provide for the township's fair share of the region's affordable housing, which is satisfied by the adoption. So of all those pages of goals and objectives, you pulled out one that it meets. So I don't think that's enough.
I'm sorry, what is that?
I'm not talking to you, Cindy, you're talking to Graham.
Well, so just to clarify, the planning board in their deliberations identified that objective to be consistent. That's why it's included. The whereas states, whereas the memorandum prepared by the planning board secretary dated July 11th states in relevant part that the board felt the proposed ordinance achieved consistency with the settlement agreement and objective 1.05, as you just read.
Thank you, Graham. I was just trying to understand.
Any other comments? May I have a motion to approve Resolution 22-181?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus?
No.
Deputy Mayor Thal-Eglow?
No.
Mr. Vinayak?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman?
Yes.
Mayor Megan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance 2604-22, procedure for passing an ordinance on final reading. I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2604-22, ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Millburn Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with the law. I declare the hearing open.
Can you describe where OR1, OR2, and OR3 actually are within the township?
Are you asking me?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, up at the mall.
I just,
OR1 is the mall up across from the mall at Short Hill. No, the Hilton across from the mall at Short Hills. There's 37 acres of land up there and office buildings. That's OR1.
and what's the density up there?
What, we have to follow.
Yeah, we do have to follow
Following
procedure.
Oh,
protocol
I'm
here?
sorry.
Mr. Feld, I
I
apologize.
wasn't looking up.
My name is
Let's-
Jeffrey Feld, 11 Alexander Lane, Short Hills, New Jersey. I'm going to just give a set of comments now, and rather than coming up each ordinance, just say that they're incorporated.
Okay.
All right, so give me a little extra time.
Mhm.
We heard before about two conflicting constitutional obligations. One, provide a realistic opportunity to put affordable housing. But the citizens, we've also been talking today, as one person said, like the cornerstone of democracy is free speech and citizens' participation. This panel has never really emphasized that you have to balance two constitutional issues here. They're in competition. And I am shocked because about 20 minutes ago, Mr. Viniak, who's not here, I wish I could be looking at his eyes, said that the judge gave you a 30-day deadline to approve the settlement, come to a settlement. When did you tell us? You never told us that there was a gun to your head. You never told the public. That's a material information. That's public disclosure. That's fraud on us. When we talk about public input, and we have a competition, and one of the problems is we talk about the April 2018 plan that had densities. We have this July 30th out of the blue densities. Did you ever tell the public that the densities were increasing? That you were changing zonings as to the B2, making new subdivisions? We are going to have litigation, and there's one fundamental issue that the judge has to get to, and I've been telling you this since July 30th, the constitutional right of free speech. I wrote on posted you the last written opinion by Judge Alvin as a Supreme Court justice. Justice Alvin has been called the conscience of our state Supreme Court. He talks about robust, informed civic participation. It did not occur here. We've now heard the questions I have as to the resolution that you're basing your actions on. Was it drafted by a planner or was it drafted by an attorney? There's a legal opinion. There's no limitation on second reading comments. So I'm going to continue. The unauthorized practice of law. Are you relying on an opinion of a planner? Did he just give you a legal opinion? That's the unauthorized practice of law. The opinion should have come from that gentleman or Mr. Buzak. Has that happened? As I said before, every ordinance should have a good housekeeping seal of approval as to the form and legality. We don't do that. Why? Again, the template for this resolution, this ordinance. Well, we just heard before, but in 2018, our master plan, we didn't have these guidance. And I'm telling everyone, the importance of this overlay is that we know when someone goes for a variance, they know what they had to comply for. That's why you need to have setback, Mr. Viniak. That's why you need to have height restrictions now. Because one of the problems we've been having, I've been telling you this, is that we're trying to do two different theories. We're trying to use the municipal land use law, but sometimes we're trying to look at the local land and redevelopment law, where you have a redevelopment plan and a redevelopment study. And that's really what Fair Share wanted us to do, is to declare the DPW an area in need of redevelopment. Unfortunately, this is Short Hills, this is Millburn, that the public will never take the word blight to understand it. Because when you have a redevelopment plan, it sets forth all the things that you're doing in this overlay ordinance with the setbacks. And a lot of times we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And it's very important that we have today, that we understand the overlays, that we understand, will there be rooftop decks in any of these areas? We need to avoid what we went through with Woodland and Chatham Road. How many months did we spend fighting over rooftop decks? The importance of this is that everyone needs to know what are the restrictions, what are allowed to have this, so we don't have 8 months planning board hearings. That's why it's important to know all these provisions. And Mr. Wasserman, you have to understand about the constitutional obligations. It's the opportunity to provide a reasonable opportunity to make affordable housing. And the reason I raise that, what's the status of Silverman? They had planning board approvals.
Mr. Felt, we are discussing 2604-22.
So I've asked you who drafted the template, what attorney signed off on it, answer the question, will there be rooftop decks? And also understand, we heard before when the people were coming out about this, about the constitutional obligations, where did you get the input of the people when you approved the settlement? That didn't happen.
Thank you.
And at some point, this whole thing is going to be blown up.
Thank you, Mr. Felt. Does anyone else have any questions about ordinance 2604-22? Please.
Yes. Do I have to restate my name and address?
No, we know who you are.
Thank you. It's a little late and I'm just going to apologize to everyone in advance because I'm ad-libbing. So I'm going to ask the members of the committee, did you actually watch the video that I put out?
No.
Okay. Let me explain to you what the contents of that were. So,
Mr. Kong, I'm going to cut you off and just tell you, we are talking about ordinance.
yes, I
number
am
26.
going to talk about the
Okay,
ordinance.
that's what we're going to, because we
Okay,
have 5
so-
of them to go,
Okay, sure.
13
Yeah,
of
yeah.
them.
And I'm going to speak on each
That
one of
one
them. Believe
specifically.
me, I will speak on each one of them.
Thank you, sir.
So the constitutional obligation that everyone keeps throwing around, this is not site specific, okay? So Tara said earlier, Fair Share came to us, they wanted the densities near the train station. Well, Fair Share doesn't actually have a say in that case. Fair Share only has the constitutional obligation for our town is to provide opportunities for affordable housing. It is not a constitutional obligation to provide affordable housing near a train station. Do you realize this? Because why would you accept these densities? In the video that I'm talking about, you can rearrange the densities to greatly mitigate the impact on all of the residential zones. OR1 is the furthest away from any of the residential zones. Why is it not 40 units an acre? Can anyone explain that? Maybe if you thought about it for a second and you put that in a plan and you went back to the court, you would realize that the court then needs to make a judgment as to whether or not your decision is more or less, satisfying your constitutional obligation. Okay, so think about that for a second. We actually have the right to change around the densities and present a plan back to the court that satisfies more of our constitutional obligation while mitigating the impact on neighborhoods like South Mountain, Glenwood, and Wyoming. So I encourage you to actually listen to your constituents. Listen to the research that we've done. There's a process here. I know it's a little bit difficult for some of the members on the dais to understand process. There's procedures, there's courts, there's trials. It's very confusing. But,
Kung,
yes?
we're talking about 2604-22.
Yes, 2604-22 relates to the density changes in the OR1 zone. And I'm explaining to you that there is a better solution that is also constitutionally compliant. I suggest that you perhaps retain new legal counsel that might have better insight into this. I don't know what the resistance to retaining new legal counsel is. We've heard that Mr. Buzak has lied to our faces repeatedly. So yes, I will go back to the ordinance of OR1. I think that you should probably think about the plans that we put out there where OR1 is put at 25 units an acre so that we don't have to do the dump project. Think about that for a second. Listen to all of the court opinions that have come through. Retain new legal counsel. Mr. Buzak said he would quit if you wanted to go back to fair share. Why? He'd make more money. Does that make any sense to you? I will be back for the remaining ordinances.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Khan.
you.
Does anyone else have any other questions in reference to ordinance number 2604-22? Thank you. OR1.
R1. That's the zone across from the Short Hills Mall.
Yep.
It's separated by a divided road, and it doesn't abut any existing Milburn or Short Hills neighborhoods. Is that correct? The densities in this area should be much higher. It's not in anyone's backyard. There's nothing out there other than a tall hotel. Why didn't you increase the densities in this area? It doesn't make any sense that you would leave the density so low. This might also have been a good place to put 100% affordable development if you actually had to build it. And, you know, fair share, yeah, they want it near the train, right? They want to create all these transit villages all over the state. Well, you don't have to give in to what they want. You could propose an alternative, like running a jitney. It's my understanding that Springfield runs a jitney to the Short Hills train station to bring its residents that don't live near a train station to the train station. We could have done something like that. There were better options. So I'm very disappointed in all of you for not considering other options. I'm very disappointed in all of you for not firing your attorney who has misled you. And I'm very disappointed in you for not firing McManus, who has clearly done a terrible job for this town.
Thank you.
I just want to also add, I thought I heard the fair share told you what to do. Is that correct? Did I hear that quote from you, Richard?
Yeah.
Fair share told you what to do,
Told us what to do.
told us what to do. Now,
That's
how,
not how I would phrase it.
well, it was said tonight.
Well, then you can go-
So are you taking it back?
I'm taking it back.
You're taking it back.
Mrs. Pasternak, what would you like to talk about?
I'd like to say that you
2604-22.
just heard this gentleman who studied this in detail, these two gentlemen who dove deep into this and have found out that there's no reason to have these densities in this zone. He's given you his rationale, and you said fair share told you what to do. You don't have to do what fair share told you what to do. You can do what your residents, who are much smarter, obviously, than the attorney that you were trusting to give you advice as to why that would not be a great idea, that there are better ideas, put a pause on it and change it and go back to them and say, we're willing to do what we want to do within the confines of our constitutional obligations. That makes so much sense to me and most other people on this planet. You can rearrange densities. You heard that also said. You can do that. It's in the document that says what your obligation as township committee members and negotiators are. So why won't you? Please tell the public why you won't do that. Another thing that came to my mind, when we sat in the hearing that Jeff Feld made sure we got access to, we heard Mr. Special Master
Frank
Banish state the Woodmont project would be the gold standard of any redevelopment project in New Jersey. So clearly there's a target on that friggin' project. And that's a problem because that's what's holding you back. And we know it. We're not stupid here. We all see what's going on. There's a puppet master telling you three what to do, and you will not listen to your constituents. You just won't. And if you smirk and smile at me one more time like that, Maggie Miggins,
Yes.
you really have a lot of nerve, okay?
I
don't
smile all the
appreciate
time.
it.
You're entitled to
No,
your feelings.
your smile is a smirk. It's not a smile, okay?
No, it's not.
What is this resistance to getting rid of this council that gave you such poor advice? I 100% agree with that comment. You should vote this down and you should listen to your constituents.
We have somebody online.
Good evening, Perry
Good evening.
Urso, 514 Milburn Avenue in Short Hills. I know you're discussing the ordinance 2604-22, the OR zone.
Correct.
Just to kind of simplify, actually would like to include the CMO zone, which is 2605. Can I do all this now or I have to call back?
I think it's just easier if we stick to one, just do this one for now, Mrs. Urso, please.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, though. Thank you for
I
asking.
mean, not that I don't mind, but you know.
I
just think
appreciate
You don't
that.
want to keep hearing me.
We don't mind.
Okay, so my question is, based on the overlay, I've asked multiple times, Beth McManus, I've asked Mr. McDonald, why the B3 was overlooked. I've been in several planning board meetings, and I continually am told that it can't be discussed. At the last meeting, Mr. McDonald, I believe, said the B3 was not referenced, or there wasn't enough land or wasn't enough property. I don't know exactly, can he elaborate on that? How much land do you need? How much property do you need? I mean, you know, there's multiple properties up on the Upper Milburn Avenue. What's to say that a couple property owners don't decide, you know what, hey, we got this overlay, we're going to join our properties. So I'd like to, Mr. McDonald and Ms. Miggins, if you would please, at your request, ask him exactly if he could elaborate on that.
Sure.
So my question is based on doing some development myself, and do all other the overlay sites require to have elevators over certain heights? And again, I will elaborate that my second question in particular regards the B3 zone known as the Upper Milburn Avenue. So what prohibits property owners in a non-overlay zone from filing a builder's remedy lawsuit claiming you have exclusionary equal protection discriminatory zoning ordinance over the excluded district? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is Leah Cruz again, 39 Whitney Road. This question is mainly directed at you, Mayor Miggins. Do you have a professional obligation to inform potential buyers about these overlay zones and changes to zoning? And if you don't have a professional obligation, do you feel you have a personal obligation? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Jess?
Hello, Richard Footer again.
Oh, hey, Mr. Futter.
Hi. So this is relative to all of these ordinances. I heard somebody mention there was a document, I think it was the master plan, where it referred to the intention of coming up with a realistic obligation to affordable housing.
Yeah.
Realistic, that word is subjective. So who actually defines what the realistic obligation is? And is that body the only input that's valid? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I keep going back to the end game of what's going to happen if and when there's a glut, because I honestly feel, looking down the road, there's going to be a glut of units that are tied to a 30-year obligation. Without knowing that, and if the state can't tell you what's going to happen with it, that clock really should be stopped, and a closer look should be taken at who's really determining what realistic number there is in any of these zones and ordinances.
Thank you, Mr. Futter. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions in regards to ordinance 2604-22, which has to do with the OR1 zone? None.
Adam does. There is one more.
Is there one more? I don't see it. Okay, yep.
Good evening again. This
Good
is
evening.
Adam Brender at 18 Whittingham. Mayor Miggins, with regard to the ordinances and zoning that you're proposing and trying to push through, how is it you have not recused yourself from these votes? How is it not a conflict of interest, being that, as mentioned by Mrs. Eglo earlier, you personally voiced concerns regarding development in your own neighborhood, and now you're trying to push through these developments throughout the rest of the town. There are already people, and I have neighbors that are literally already selling their homes and moving out of town. This will have a direct impact on your profession and your personal business. So how is it that you can at all feel comfortable that you don't have a conflict of interest and this isn't going to directly impact your personal professional matters?
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? No, he's finished. Okay. I move that this public hearing be closed.
Oh, sorry, we speak, right?
And the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law. Did you want to say something, Ms. Eglo?
Just very briefly, these are things I've been saying at the planning board meetings, the densities, the disparity is just unacceptable. Why, where my mom lives in Warren, they have affordable housing, they don't have a train. So this notion that we have to put everything by the train, that's like saying we know everyone's going to be a commute. Well, even our own residents aren't commuting like they used to. So I don't know why fair share housing, I wasn't in the room. I don't know how these densities came about. I know we didn't have a planner in the room. I know Graham, who is a very good planner, had to then write them based on what was given to him. I believe, I can only assume Beth McManus came up with the densities because Richard and Maggie aren't planners. So I don't know how they got there. It just makes no sense. Doesn't make any sense. That up in all that blank land, you have 20 units per acre, and down on Milburn Avenue in a 4-block area, you have 40 units per acre, looming over people's single family homes. So
thank you.
I wish I had better answers.
Mr. Petto, Mr. Feld had asked a question about the rooftop decks. Can you speak to that, please?
Certainly, happy to.
Thank you.
As addressed in the ordinance before you, under the accessory uses section, item number 6 indicates that indoor and outdoor residential amenity space is a permitted accessory use except for rooftop decks and other rooftop amenities.
I have a question about that. How does that make any sense? You've got this property up there that may or may never be developed with such low density. Why could they not have rooftop decks? They're looking at the Hilton Hotel. They're looking at JFK Parkway. They're looking at the reservoir back there. Why would you put this blanket ban on rooftop decks? People love rooftop decks. It gives them a space to go outside and meet their neighbors. Why up in the hinterlands can they not have a rooftop deck?
I think Diane asked that question earlier also. And you
Sanjeev,
were
I'm
voted
not
down for
addressing
it.
you. Sanjeev, I'm not addressing you. I'm
I'm
Mr.
actually
Petto.
listening to the conversation too, and you have brought this up and we voted it down.
Right.
Sanjeev, I know Miss Miggins has tried to get a town-wide rooftop ban that failed because also the planning board said that was that was inconsistent. So now, Ms. Miggins, you were able to put them in each one of these little ordinances and you got that pushed in, right?
And I support that too.
I know you do, Sanjeev, but again, I'm not addressing you.
It's just really, it just is,
There was one other question too. We had to.
oh, but Sanjeev got to speak, so I
No,
think.
no, I'm not stopping.
Okay, great. So I think that it's not thought out to do a blanket rooftop ban, especially when you're talking about up there. Like there is no reason to do that. And it just is poor. And it's also going against what the planning board said. So we're clearly, the TC is not listening to their planning board at all. So yeah. No, I really didn't want to, we're not actually, Maggie said we're not having a back and forth, Sanjeev, so I actually want to speak to the rest.
I'm not even
before you're
going,
done.
answering
go
your
ahead. Do you wanna
question,
speak
Ms.
Yeah,
Purpose.
I did.
I was in the planning board myself when the
Wait,
Woodland
what?
property came in. And it kind of went through probably 6 months of meetings just on the top, having. a
Sanjeev,
rooftop
I'm
deck
well
there.
aware, like, who are you talking to? I'm well aware of what happened at the planning board. But if you feel like you have to get some words in,
What would you like to say, Ms. Prudence?
I want to
About
say.
ordinance.
I do, I just want to talk.
2604-22.
Thank you. So I'm gonna clearly vote no for this, but I also feel like I don't know why, with the compliance hearing being pushed to the end of August, why we're even talking about this right now, why we can't just like take a minute for a second and have more conversations before we're voting it, because we have time. We have time at this point. And why not go back to Ed and say, hey, some of our residents came up with these ideas. Like, why not go to the judge and say, hey, like, we have some other ideas. Is this okay? And so actually at this point, there is no like gun to our head and we have time. And so I'm voting no for all of these. And I think that
So
we should just take a minute.
thank you.
Yep, thanks.
I had moved that the public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law. May I please have a second?
Second,
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Prupus?
No.
Deputy Mayor Thor Eglo?
No.
Mr. Vinayak?
Yes,
Mr. Wasserman?
yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, can we take 2 minutes?
Yes, we may.
Are you guys talking at all? Because we cannot hear.
Sanjeev, I think we're having a similar issue as before. Everybody stand by. Thank you.
Okay.
Alex, can you hear me? Hello, everyone. It appears the same issue is happening. I think it's like the 1.5 hour mark. Something's going wrong with the system. So unfortunately, we're going to have to reboot again. Apologies. Please just sign back on in about a minute and we'll get started again. Thank you, everybody. And again, apologies.